Thanks for everybody who shared. There really was a theme that emerged for me. It's the necessity of practicing and the challenges of practicing in this time and place. So sharing what came to me from your sharings. The world's a rough place. Yeah. I wanted to just reflect on Seju's sharing about the shooting on Saturday. It was also very impactful for me. That was our in-between time. We did a full day on Saturday on our retreat, and then we went home. And then I got in the car to drive back out on Sunday morning, and I heard on the radio, about the shooting that had happened the previous night. And as many of you know, my stepdaughter is trans woman, and she's expressed, 29 years old, and expressed often, that she doesn't feel safe in the world. And here this is, just a horrific event. So I was crying as I heard the account, and we immediately, when I got to the session, I asked Sokyo to add the victims of the shooting to our Enmei-juku Kannon-gyo memorial chant, which we were planning to do anyway. So we offered that. And it was a blessing to be able to hold that in that way, in that container, with that service. And it was. And I heard in Seju, in your words, that previously your reaction might have been a little bit more maybe just concerned about those you knew about, and your response now it seemed like almost more bigger hearted, really big hearted and broken in the biggest way. And that's one thing that practice gives us, is a frame and a container to hold these things in this very wild and crazy world that we live in. So one thing that I think I feel strongly, and I hear it in your words too, life without a strong grounding in a spiritual practice doesn't work. It doesn't work. And what's more, this culture that we're in, America, 21st century, is not so attuned to this truth. Yeah. Other cultures are more attuned, but I think this is true. So why doesn't it work? Well, my answer to that is that it doesn't work because we have to be aligned with reality. Okay? We have to be, and an existence that isn't aligned with reality doesn't work. And then typically how we live, if we don't have a spiritual grounding, is that we come up against things that continue to not work, and we continue to do them, and they continue to not work. And we suffer because we're not aligned with reality. So I use some, traditional Dharma to just point to what I mean by reality, because that's a fungible concept, you could say, right? But what I mean by that is the three seals of Buddhism are the truth of impermanence, the truth of no self, and then the truth of suffering and the cessation of suffering. So the third seal is described as either dukkha or nirvana. They're kind of inseparable from each other. Truth of suffering and then the truth of cessation of suffering, right? So impermanence, all things are always changing. Nothing is fixed. All of us will die. Everything we love and care about will pass. That's the truth. That's reality. Okay. That's the most accessible of the 3 seals. The next deeper one is no self. And this one is a little more difficult to really experience and really grasp, right? This is what we practice, is to see that this self that we identify with, that we infer to be fixed in some way, our personality, our nature, the me, isn't that way at all. It isn't fixed. It's conditioned, and it's always changing. Okay? So all of the stratagems and contrivances that are meant to protect and perpetuate and aggrandize that presumed fixed thing have no chance of success. Okay? Out of accord with the reality. And then the third seal is this the truth of dukkha, of suffering, and nirvana, the cessation of suffering. And that has to do with our relationship to the first 2 seals, how we take the first 2 seals. If we cling to things and not recognize their impermanence, we suffer. If we come from that place of the fixed identity, so we really don't experience ourselves as no self, we suffer. But when we are non-clinging of things and non-clinging of the self, then our suffering has relief. Okay. So when we live a life that's not in accord with these, then we suffer. But we have to, the world doesn't work that way. It doesn't work, according to these truths of impermanence and no self. It doesn't. There's a lot of forgetting. There's a lot of ignorance primarily. So when we're not oriented and grounded in a community of practitioners that aspire to deepen in contact of this truth of reality, in being in alignment with this truth. If we're not in a community like that, then it's impossible actually to live in that alignment. Okay. But when we are, now we come up to the challenges. Okay, we have this great gift. We have this great gift. Even those who are here for the first time, you're in the top echelon of human beings. I mean this, in terms of spiritual warriorship on the planet. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of light. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of light, but there is, the fact that you were, even born into a human body. Okay, that puts you at the upper echelon of beings. In fact, this is the only form, according to the Buddhist Dharma, that has the opportunity to transform, right? To turn an animalistic nature and an ignorant nature into wisdom and spiritual power. Okay, the human form's the only one that can do that. Even the gods can't change their state. They don't suffer enough. So we're born into this human body, and then you've met the Dharma, you've encountered the Dharma. So many of you know the parable that is told about this, which is the chances of being born in a human body and then being exposed to the Dharma are the chances of a turtle, I think it is, who lives at the bottom of the ocean, and there's a life raft that is out on the oceans. We're talking about the oceans of the whole world, and the turtle comes up once every, 100 years, I think, once every 100 years, and the chances of that turtle coming up through that life raft donut is the chance of you being born in a human form and encountering the Dharma. Now everyone here has taken it even further than that, and even engaged in practice and start doing practice and is deepening in practice. So I really mean this. Everyone here is in the upper echelon of aspiration to awaken, to live in alignment with reality. And the gifts and blessings. So let's see, I want to talk about the gifts and blessings, and then I want to talk about the challenges too. So the gifts and blessings. Well, one, I mentioned this, Seiju, that just to have that open-hearted response to a great tragedy, that's one. Myoshin bowing to a credit card machine. Yeah, I totally get it. I've heard it many times. I remember way back many years ago at GMZC, one of the retreats there, and afterwards in our sharing, one of the participants said he found himself bowing to the stairs before he walked up the stairs, and it was to the stairs, the gratitude to the stairs to be there. I'm reminded of the Tenzo at the San Francisco Zen Center, Ed, I'm forgetting his last name, he's a teacher who wrote the cookbooks. And he talked about just the great gratitude he had for the pots and pans in the kitchen.
Ed Brown.
Thank you, Seiju. Ed Brown. Yeah, the great gratitude. And yeah, those of us who have sat, have felt this many, many, many times. Gratitude for the insentient and the sentient. The great gratitude for our teachers, our Dharma brothers and sisters, our family. And we do find, and we can find, and I'm sure many of you have found, you can even have gratitude for your enemies and those who have done you wrong, those who have hurt you, those who have annoyed you. You can find space for that. The ability to handle the roller coaster of life, right? I mean, that's part of the reality of life, is to be on that roller coaster and to be able to handle it with some equanimity. And then to recognize my equanimity is running out. I can't let go of this. And to not have that, crush you, right? To be able to actually face that. That comes from your practice, from your inner aspiration. I'm sure, Alona, you're handling what would crush many others who don't have that. Really spin them out. So we do, it's endlessly challenging, and it's challenging because, for example, the roller coaster gets a particularly rough. So there's a challenge. There's a challenge of interacting with people who don't have the same commitment, whether it's traveling somewhere and now suddenly everybody is really intent on getting hammered and that's just not where you're at, right? Or it's wanting to connect with someone like Amy mentioned, who just doesn't, has a different path, as you put it, Amy. It doesn't have the same values or doesn't even have the same worldview. So there are these edges always. So yeah. So there's the necessity to practice and there's the challenge to practice, but it's not easy. It's not like we enter into this refuge where everything is peachy keen. It's going to be smooth sailing from here on out. In fact, it really is the opposite. It's that we're really throwing ourselves into the catastrophe of life. We're throwing ourselves into a full-hearted experience of our own suffering. We're welcoming in all of it. Many people don't even want to interact with people who are on different paths than them, Amy. So the aspiration to do that is a big-hearted one. And most people in this culture, right? I mean, we're Buddhists, and in America, we're a tiny minority. So yeah, I know we're in Boulder, so it's a little bit better chances here. But even so, and generally, it is a minority. So most people, are not going to be on the same path. But we want to, be able to interact. I think an important discernment is to recognize that there are many, 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 many authentic paths, and particularly if they have if it's a spiritual path, there's something that you can connect with them, if it is. Now, I would never, judge someone on their path. But what I would look at is if they're judging, and if they've got an ideology or an idea that's causing pain and suffering to others, which some of the religions in this country are doing, then I would take a stand against that. But it always comes down to individual people. You want to connect with individual people. So I think everybody's looking for something. Everybody's looking for, everybody wants to be happy. Everybody's looking for happiness, and everyone is looking for connection. So I would always look for, and I try to always just connect with someone at the most human level, what they want out of life. If I find that they have ideas that they're really committed to that don't work for me, that I don't agree with, then I just find that there's just a limit to how much I can connect with them. Which makes it all the more precious to connect with people who have a similar, outlook. It's connecting with those who have the similar openness. It's not that they have the answers, because you don't have the answers, right? We have questions. Yeah. So this it's very important. You have to practice. You have to practice. Life doesn't work without it. And some of us are coming out of an intensive retreat, and several of us spoke to the quality of that. And there's an edge that happens, coming out of retreat and then going into retreat. And that's part of this life. In my life, it's been a wonderful opportunity to live what's, primarily a lay life, with family and profession, but doing intensive practice, daily, weekly, intense practice, and monthly retreats for 30 years. And so it was deep dives and then reemergences, and deep dives and reemergences. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful practice path for me. It's been very very powerful for me. And that's, I teach it and I offer it and I recommend it, that kind of rhythm, in order to live in this culture, but with this necessary spiritual grounding that we need. So I shared with several people at session who are, dipping their toes in regular retreat practice, how doing that, even if it's one day, a one intensive Zazenkai day a month, it puts all of the sitting for the rest of the month, it just smooths it all out. Now it just becomes sitting in the morning, sitting in the weeks, it just becomes easeful, actually, very natural and easeful. And there isn't this internal pressure that we put on ourselves to do it and go deep and calm down, practice hard. That's a natural sort of thing as we want to develop our practice in a rich way. But when you do the one concentrated, and maybe it's one day every 2 months or even one day every 3 months, wherever you're at, but I would recommend go in this direction. And then the daily stuff and the weekly stuff just becomes easeful. And then over time, it deepens it smooths out, you become more harmonious, and those edges become natural, because we have these edges and we have these, I don't know if the word Shoen used was masks or costumes, skins, something like this. And we do have these. Yeah. But we don't want to invest in these, we don't want to identify with those. Those are just different roles that we shift through. So we move when we do have a true grounding in our own authenticity, our own authentic self, then we can move from role to role effortlessly. We say host and guest, teacher and student. You just move from one to the other, even minute to minute you can shift. But in this culture, and people without a spiritual practice, they're not doing that. Many people are more or less identified with whatever their role or identity is at that time. So, but that's okay. You can let them, just have their experience, and you can have yours. But again, this is where the preciousness and even the necessity of being with and spending time and practicing with others who are also on the same path is very, very important.